My son's hand cracked across my face like a gunshot. I'm 69 years old with COPD, and I just asked his wife to please not smoke in my house because I literally cannot breathe. But Daniel looked me dead in the eye and said, "She's stressed. Back off, old man." The slap sent me stumbling backward in my own living room. Blood filled my mouth. My 5-year-old granddaughter started crying. And Rebecca? She laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever seen. 40 years as an emergency room doctor, 40 years saving lives, working double shifts, missing family dinners to help strangers breathe again. I put Daniel through college. I bought his first car. When he lost his job, I welcomed his family into my $1.2 million home, rent-free. This was my reward, a bloody mouth and my daughter-in-law's laughter echoing off the walls I paid for. But here's what my ungrateful son didn't know. I wasn't just some helpless old man he could push around. I was a doctor who reads legal documents very carefully. And when I built this house, I made sure it had very specific rules about tobacco use. Rules that, when broken, change everything. 3 days later, Daniel would discover exactly what happens when you assault someone who owns a medical trust with ironclad violation clauses. Sometimes the quiet ones don't just hit back. They hit back legally. And that kind of revenge is permanent. I'm about to tell you a story that'll make you think twice about disrespecting the people who love you most. But first, drop a comment and let me know. What's the most disrespectful thing a family member has ever done to you? I read every single comment, and honestly, some of your stories are wilder than mine. Hit that subscribe button too, because trust me, you don't want to miss how this ends. My name is Dr. Edward Mitchell. I spent 4 decades in emergency medicine at Mercy General Hospital. 40 years of saving lives, watching people take their last breaths, helping families through their darkest moments. I've seen what happens when lungs fail. I've held the hands of dying patients who couldn't draw another breath. That's why the cigarette smoke in my own home felt like a death sentence. The COPD came slowly at first. Years of exposure to hospital chemicals, cleaning agents, and yes, secondhand smoke from patients. My lungs started betraying me right around retirement. Some mornings I'd wake up gasping. Other days, a simple walk to the mailbox left me winded. But I was a doctor. I understood the science. Clean air meant survival. Smoke meant suffocation. When I built this house in the medical district 15 years ago, every detail focused on breathing easier. HEPA filtration systems in every room, hardwood floors instead of carpet to prevent dust, windows positioned for maximum airflow. I even had the walls painted with low VOC paint to protect my deteriorating lungs. This wasn't just my house, it was my life support system. 40 years of saving others who couldn't breathe. Now I was the one fighting for every breath, and the person threatening my survival lived right under my roof. I remember the day I set up the medical trust for this house. March 15th, 2019. My estate attorney, Patricia Wells, spread the documents across her mahogany desk like a surgeon laying out instruments. "Edward, this is more than a standard trust," she explained, sliding the papers toward me. "You're creating a health sanctuary with legal protection." I signed each page carefully, my doctor's handwriting precise and measured. The house wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to the Mitchell Family Medical Trust. But I remained the trustee, with complete control over who could live here. The trust had one non-negotiable rule: absolutely no tobacco use on the premises. Not cigarettes, not cigars, not vaping, nothing. The air quality had to remain pristine for medical reasons. "What happens if someone violates the tobacco clause?" I asked Patricia. She pointed to Section 7.3 in the thick document. "Immediate grounds for eviction, no warnings, no grace periods. The violation terminates their right to occupy the property." I thought about Daniel as I signed that section, my successful son with his banking career and beautiful family. Surely this clause would never matter. But I added one more thing to the trust that day, something I kept completely private. When I listed the beneficiaries, I didn't just include Daniel. I also named my granddaughter Emma as an alternate heir, just in case. This house meant everything to me. Every morning I'd walk through the rooms breathing deeply. Clean air filled my lungs without the sharp stab of pain I'd grown accustomed to. The $125 million investment wasn't just about luxury, it was about staying alive. My bedroom faced east to catch the morning sun. The kitchen windows opened to cross-ventilate cooking odors. Even the basement had its own air filtration system, just in case I needed to convert it into living space someday. The irony wasn't lost on me. A doctor who'd spent decades telling patients to quit smoking now couldn't tolerate even a whiff of cigarette smoke. One exposure sent me into coughing fits that lasted hours. My chest would tighten like someone was squeezing my lungs in a vice. But this house was my sanctuary. Here I could breathe freely for the first time since my diagnosis. I had security cameras installed throughout the property. Not because I worried about burglars, but because the house was worth more than most people's retirement accounts. The system recorded everything, video and audio, storing it all on a cloud server. Just in case, I told the installer, not really thinking about what that meant. Little did I know those cameras would capture more than attempted break-ins. Sometimes the universe has a twisted sense of humor. The recession hit Daniel hard in 2023. 20 years climbing the corporate ladder at First National Bank, and suddenly he was handed a pink slip and a 2-week severance package. He called me that Tuesday afternoon, his voice shaking with humiliation. "Dad, they eliminated my entire department. I don't know what Rebecca and I are going to do. We can't make the mortgage payments. The kids' daycare costs alone are killing us." I didn't hesitate for even a second. "Move in here," I said. "You, Rebecca, Tommy, and Sally. There's plenty of space. The basement was already partially finished. Within a week, I hired contractors to install a full kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a family room downstairs. I bought new furniture, children's toys, even stocked the refrigerator with their favorite foods. Daniel tried to talk about rent, about contributing to utilities. I waved him off. "Focus on finding work. This is what family does." I moved my bedroom upstairs to give them privacy. Suddenly, my quiet retirement home buzzed with children's laughter and family dinners. Tommy would show me his homework while Sally colored pictures at the kitchen table. Rebecca seemed genuinely grateful those first few weeks. She helped with groceries, kept the common areas clean, even cooked dinner for all of us on Sundays. "Thank you, Dr. Mitchell," she'd say. "This means everything to our family." I even went a step further. I modified the trust beneficiary list, ensuring that if anything happened to me, the family would have security. Looking back, I should have been more careful about exactly which family members I could trust. Converting the basement into a family apartment took 3 weeks and cost me $35,000. Custom cabinetry, new appliances, carpet installation, fresh paint throughout. I wanted Daniel's family to feel at home, not like temporary guests. The day they moved in, I watched Rebecca explore every corner of their new space. She ran her hands along the granite countertops, tested the water pressure in their private bathroom, even complimented the recessed lighting I'd had installed. "This is nicer than our old apartment," she told Daniel. "Your dad really went all out." I felt proud watching my grandchildren claim their new bedrooms. 8-year-old Tommy immediately started arranging his action figures on the built-in shelves. 5-year-old Sally hugged my legs and said, "Grandpa's house is the best house ever." That night, I made a decision that seemed generous at the time. I called Patricia Wells and modified the trust documentation. Instead of Daniel being the sole heir after my death, I split the inheritance. 60% would go to Daniel, 40% to Emma, my granddaughter who was studying pre-med at Northwestern. "Emma represents the future of our family's medical legacy," I explained to Patricia. "She understands the importance of health and healing." The paperwork took 2 hours to finalize. I signed each page feeling good about providing security for the people I loved most. I thought I was protecting my family's future. What I'd actually done was create a legal time bomb. The first cigarette appeared 3 weeks after they moved in. I walked into the living room that Tuesday morning and smelled it immediately. That sharp, acrid odor that hit my lungs like acid. My chest tightened instantly. Rebecca stood by the back window, barely cracking it open while she smoked. When she saw me, she quickly stubbed out the cigarette and waved the smoke away. Sorry, Dr. Mitchell. I usually go outside, but it's raining and I just needed a quick stress relief. My throat was already starting to close up. The familiar burning sensation spread through my chest. Rebecca, I have COPD. Even a little smoke can trigger an attack that lasts hours. She looked genuinely sorry. Of course, I completely forgot. It won't happen again. But it did happen again, and again. Each cigarette felt like someone was slowly suffocating me with a pillow. One cigarette indoors meant 3 hours of wheezing, coughing, and gasping for clean air. My inhaler could only do so much. The frequency increased gradually. First it was just during rainstorms, then it was too cold to go outside, then it was too windy. By winter, Rebecca was smoking in the house almost daily. Just crack a window, became her standard response when I asked her to step outside. But cracking a window doesn't eliminate smoke. It just spreads it around more slowly. My own home was becoming uninhabitable, and every time I brought it up, Rebecca had a reason why going outside wasn't possible. My doctor visits became more frequent. Dr. Sarah Kim would listen to my lungs through her stethoscope and frown. Edward, your lung function is declining faster than expected. Are you being exposed to irritants at home? I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. How do you explain that your own family is slowly killing you? I'm trying to avoid triggers, I said weakly. She prescribed a stronger inhaler and mentioned the possibility of home oxygen therapy if things got worse. COPD is progressive, but environmental factors can accelerate the decline. Whatever's causing these flare-ups needs to stop. The irony ate at me constantly. 40 years as an emergency physician, and I couldn't solve my own medical crisis. I'd treated countless patients with smoking-related illnesses. I'd given the quit smoking lecture thousands of times. Now I was trapped in my own house with the very toxin that was destroying my lungs. I installed 3 additional air purifiers throughout the main floor. Industrial-grade units that sounded like jet engines, but could filter smoke particles from the air. The monthly electricity bill doubled. Some days I'd sit in my bedroom upstairs, door closed, air purifier running, just trying to breathe normally. I could hear Rebecca smoking downstairs while my grandchildren played nearby. The children started asking questions. Why does Grandpa cough so much? Why do those machines make so much noise? Why does the house smell funny sometimes? Daniel's standard answer was always the same. Grandpa has sensitive lungs. What he really meant was, Grandpa's health doesn't matter as much as Mom's cigarettes. The first real confrontation happened on a Sunday afternoon in February. Rebecca was smoking in the living room while Tommy did homework at the coffee table. The smoke drifted directly toward my grandson, who started coughing. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Rebecca, would you mind taking that outside? Tommy's developing a cough, and my lungs are really struggling today. She looked at me with what I can only describe as annoyance. It's 15 degrees outside, Dr. Mitchell. I'm not going to freeze to death for a 5-minute cigarette. Then maybe just wait until later, when the weather improves? She took another long drag and blew the smoke toward the ceiling. I'm dealing with a lot of stress right now. Job hunting, kids cooped up indoors, money problems. Smoking helps me cope. Daniel walked in just as I opened my mouth to respond. What's going on? Your father wants me to go stand in a blizzard to smoke, Rebecca said before I could speak. Daniel looked at me like I'd suggested something unreasonable. Dad, she's right. It's brutal outside today. Can't you just use your inhaler? It's not about the inhaler, son. It's about basic respect for... For what? Your house rules that change depending on the weather? That stung more than I expected. I saw something in Daniel's eyes I'd never seen before. Not just disagreement, but dismissal. Like I was being unreasonable for wanting to breathe in my own home. That's when I realized, in their minds, I was the problem. Spring brought no relief. If anything, Rebecca's smoking increased. She'd light up in the kitchen after breakfast, in the living room during her afternoon break, sometimes even in the hallway outside the children's rooms. The windows are open now, she'd say when I mentioned it. Fresh air is coming in. But fresh air mixed with cigarette smoke isn't fresh air. It's just diluted poison. Daniel's attitude grew more hostile with each conversation. Dad, you're being controlling. Rebecca's not some teenager you can boss around. She's an adult woman dealing with serious stress. I'm not trying to control anyone. I'm trying to survive in my own house. Your house? I thought this was our family home now. That comment hit me like a physical blow. Our family home? I'd paid every mortgage payment, every property tax bill, every utility payment for 15 years. Now, suddenly, it was ours? One evening that April, I found a glass of wine and a lit cigarette sitting on my dining room table. Rebecca was nowhere to be seen. The cigarette burned slowly in an ashtray, my grandmother's antique crystal ashtray that hadn't been used in 20 years. Smoke curled up from the abandoned cigarette, filling my dining room with toxic fumes. I stood there wheezing, staring at that cigarette, and felt something cold settle in my chest. That night, I walked to my home office and opened a filing cabinet I hadn't touched in 4 years. I pulled out the medical trust documents and read them carefully for the first time since signing. Section 7.3 was exactly as I remembered. The disrespect reached a new level in May. I came home from a doctor's appointment to find Rebecca smoking in my bedroom. My bedroom. The sanctuary I'd created specifically for clean air and healing sleep. She was sitting in my reading chair, cigarette in one hand, romance novel in the other, ash falling onto my hardwood floor. Rebecca, what are you doing? She didn't even look up from her book. Daniel said I could use your room for privacy while he takes a work call downstairs. It's quieter up here. But you're smoking in here. This room has never had smoke in it. I cracked the window. See? She gestured lazily toward the barely opened window. My chest was already tightening. The air in my own bedroom, the one place I could retreat to when the house became unbearable, was now poisoned. I need you to leave. Now. She finally looked at me, and I saw something ugly in her expression. Not embarrassment or apology, but resentment. Fine. God, you're dramatic about everything. She took one final defiant drag of her cigarette before stubbing it out in my water glass on the nightstand. My water glass. That night I slept in the living room. The bedroom reeked of smoke so badly I couldn't breathe lying down. When I mentioned it to Daniel the next morning, he rolled his eyes. Dad, you're being ridiculous. It's just a little smoke. Open some windows and run a fan. That's when I remembered the security cameras. Everything was recorded. Video and audio. Every conversation, every dismissal, every violation of my health and dignity. By June, I felt like a prisoner in my own home. Rebecca smoked wherever and whenever she wanted. The dining room, the living room, the kitchen while cooking dinner, even the hallway outside my bedroom door. She needs to decompress, Daniel would say whenever I brought it up. Job hunting is incredibly stressful. But Rebecca hadn't been job hunting in months. I'd seen her browsing social media, watching Netflix, taking long afternoon naps. The job hunting stress had become a convenient excuse for every cigarette. The children started avoiding the main floor. Tommy did his homework in his basement bedroom now. Sally played with her dolls downstairs instead of the spacious living room upstairs. They were developing the same coping mechanism I was: retreat to the lower level where the smoke was less concentrated. My grandchildren were learning to hide from their own mother's addiction. One evening, I decided to try a different approach. Instead of asking Rebecca directly, I spoke to Daniel privately. Son, I need to be honest with you. The smoking is making my COPD much worse. Dr. Kim says continued exposure could land me in the hospital. Daniel's response shocked me. Dad, maybe it's time to consider that Mom's stress is more important than your comfort level. She's sacrificing a lot living here, supporting our family while I look for work. Comfort level? My medical condition had become a comfort level issue? That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to test them one final time. Give them one last chance to show basic human decency. If they failed that test, the games would be over. The morning of July 8th started peacefully enough. I'd spent the night researching my legal options, but decided to try one final, gentle approach. Maybe if I explained the medical reality clearly enough, they'd finally understand. Rebecca was smoking in the living room while cartoons played on the television. Tommy and Sally sat on the couch, occasionally coughing when the smoke drifted their way. I approached carefully, keeping my voice soft and respectful. Rebecca, I know this has been a difficult conversation, but I really need to ask you to smoke outside. My doctor says continued exposure to cigarette smoke could cause permanent lung damage. She looked at me with complete indifference. Dr. Mitchell, I've been smoking for 15 years. A little smoke never hurt anyone. But it is hurting me, and it's affecting the children too. Look, they're coughing. She glanced at Tommy and Sally, then back at me. Kids cough. That's what they do. Please, I'm asking you, person to person, parent to parent. Help me stay healthy in my own home. Rebecca took a long, deliberate drag of her cigarette and blew the smoke directly toward me. Maybe you're being a little too sensitive about this whole thing. I heard footsteps on the stairs. Daniel was coming up from the basement, and his expression was already dark with annoyance. What's going on now? He asked, his voice sharp with irritation. Your father is harassing me about smoking again, Rebecca said, not looking away from the television. Daniel's face flushed red with anger. Dad, we've had this conversation 100 times. Then he said the words that would end everything. She's stressed from job hunting every single day. Back off. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. Daniel's open palm connected with my right cheek with a sound like a gunshot. The impact sent me stumbling backward, my 69-year-old balance no match for my 34-year-old son's strength. Pain exploded across my face. My cheek burned like someone had pressed a hot iron against the skin. My ears rang with a high-pitched whine that drowned out everything else for several seconds. I tasted blood in my mouth. My tongue found the spot where my teeth had cut the inside of my cheek. The metallic taste mixed with the bitter cigarette smoke still hanging in the air. Tommy and Sally sat frozen on the couch, their eyes wide with shock. 5-year-old Sally started crying, not loud sobs, but the quiet, confused tears of a child who didn't understand what she'd just witnessed. Rebecca laughed, an actual laugh, like she'd just watched something amusing on television. Finally, she said, taking another drag of her cigarette, someone put him in his place. I stood there in my own living room, blood in my mouth, my face throbbing with pain, while my daughter-in-law celebrated the fact that my son had just assaulted me. Daniel wasn't done talking. Your old-fashioned rules are ridiculous, Dad. This is 2024, not 1950. She's not some servant who has to follow your every command. My left ear was still ringing, but I heard every word clearly. She's dealing with depression, anxiety, and the stress of supporting this family while I'm between jobs. If smoking helps her cope, then that's what she's going to do. I touched my cheek gingerly, already swelling. Rebecca ground her cigarette out in my grandmother's crystal ashtray and immediately lit another one. And in that moment, standing in my own living room, with my face on fire and my grandchildren watching me get humiliated, I understood something fundamental had changed. I wasn't their family patriarch anymore. I was their victim. But what Daniel didn't know was that in exactly 72 hours, he would learn the difference between those two roles. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten or argue or demand apologies. I simply walked away. My face throbbed with each heartbeat as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. Behind me, I heard Daniel saying something about finally setting boundaries, but the words sounded distant and muffled through my damaged hearing. In my bedroom, I locked the door and sat down at my computer desk. My hands trembled slightly as I moved the mouse and opened the security system software. The camera footage was crystal clear, multiple angles of the living room, all recording in high definition with perfect audio quality. I scrolled back to 3:17 p.m. and watched myself get slapped by my own son. The timestamp read clearly, July 8th, 2024, 3:17:42 p.m. I watched Rebecca's laughter. I heard Daniel's exact words about my old-fashioned rules and how I needed to be put in my place. I saw my grandchildren's terrified faces as they witnessed their grandfather being assaulted. The recording was automatically backed up to cloud storage. Permanent. Unalterable. Legal evidence. I saved the file with a specific name. Elder Abuse Evidence, July 8, 2024. Then I opened another folder on my computer, one I hadn't accessed in 4 years. The Mitchell Family Medical Trust documents filled my screen. 43 pages of legal language that most people would find boring and irrelevant. But I wasn't most people. I was the trustee, and trustees have power that beneficiaries often forget about. I found Section 7. 3 and read it carefully. Any use of tobacco products on trust property constitutes immediate grounds for termination of occupancy rights. No warning period required. No appeal process available. My swollen face reflected in the computer screen as I scrolled through the beneficiary sections. Daniel was listed as primary heir, but the document also showed the modification I'd made the previous year. Emma Mitchell, my granddaughter, was now listed as alternate beneficiary with power to assume full inheritance if the primary beneficiary was disqualified. I picked up my phone and dialed Patricia Wells, my estate attorney. Patricia, it's Edward Mitchell. I need to schedule an emergency meeting, tonight, if possible. What's the situation, Edward? I touched my swollen cheek and looked at the video evidence on my screen. It's time to enforce the trust. Patricia Wells's voice was steady and professional when she called me back an hour later. I've reviewed the trust documents and the video evidence you sent. Edward, this is more than a civil matter. What happened to you constitutes elder abuse under Illinois law. I sat in my locked bedroom, ice pack pressed against my swollen face, listening to my attorney explain my legal options. The video is extremely compelling evidence. Timestamp, clear audio, multiple witnesses. Daniel's exact words about putting you in your place establish intent. And Rebecca's response shows a pattern of disrespect that supports your case. My computer screen displayed the security footage frozen at the moment of impact. My son's hand connecting with my face, captured in perfect digital clarity. What about the trust violation? I asked. The smoking constitutes clear breach of Section 7.3. Combined with the assault, we have grounds for immediate eviction and trust modification. You have multiple legal remedies available. I'd been thinking like a victim for months. But I wasn't just a victim. I was a trustee with legal authority, a property owner with rights, and an elder abuse survivor with recourse. Patricia, I want to file everything. Elder abuse report, trust violation notice, eviction proceedings, all of it. Are you certain? Once we start this process, there's no going back. Your relationship with Daniel will be permanently damaged. I looked at my reflection in the computer screen. The right side of my face had swollen enough to close my eye partially. A purple bruise was already forming along my cheekbone. My relationship with Daniel was permanently damaged the moment he chose to assault me rather than ask his wife to show basic respect for my health. I'll prepare the paperwork tonight. We'll file first thing Monday morning. For the first time in months, I could breathe deeply. Not because the air was cleaner, but because I was no longer powerless. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the pain in my face, though that was considerable, but because my mind was racing through legal strategies and consequences. I opened the trust documents again and read every section carefully. 4 years ago, when Patricia and I created this trust, I'd been thinking about protecting my assets and ensuring smooth inheritance transfer. I never imagined I'd be using it as a weapon against my own family. But there it was, in black and white legal language. Section 7.3, the Tobacco Prohibition Clause, and Section 12.1, which gave me absolute authority as trustee to modify beneficiary arrangements if primary beneficiaries violated trust terms. The beautiful thing about legal documents is their clarity. No room for interpretation, no emotional appeals, no manipulation, just facts and consequences. Rebecca had smoked in the house hundreds of times over 6 months. Each cigarette was a separate violation of trust terms. The video evidence provided irrefutable proof of the pattern. Daniel's assault on me constituted elder abuse, which automatically disqualified him from any inheritance under Illinois law. Simple, clean, irreversible. I spent the night documenting everything: dates, times, witnesses, photographic evidence of smoke damage to the house. I created a spreadsheet tracking every violation I could remember. The security system had been recording continuously for 8 months. Hundreds of hours of Rebecca smoking indoors, captured in digital clarity. By dawn, I had assembled a legal case that would make any prosecutor proud. But the most important document wasn't about Rebecca's smoking or Daniel's violence. It was the trust modification form that would transfer primary inheritance rights from Daniel to Emma, my 20-year-old granddaughter, who was studying pre-med at Northwestern University. A young woman who understood the sacred nature of healing. A young woman who would never poison someone's air to satisfy her own addiction. A young woman who deserved to inherit a smoke-free home where she could help people breathe easier. Monday morning at 9 a.m., I sat across from Patricia Wells in her downtown law office. My face was a masterpiece of purple and yellow bruising that made her wince when she saw me. "Edward, are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with all of these actions simultaneously?" The papers were spread across her desk like weapons being prepared for battle. Elder abuse report, trust violation notice, eviction proceeding, beneficiary modification. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Patricia picked up the video evidence folder. "The footage is devastating, Edward. Any judge who sees this will be appalled. But filing an elder abuse report against your own son will create a criminal investigation." "Good. And modifying the trust to make Emma the primary beneficiary will effectively disinherit Daniel completely." "Also good." She leaned back in her chair. "This is nuclear option, Edward. Once we file these documents, there's no path back to normal family relationships." I touched the tender bruise on my cheekbone. "Normal family relationships don't include assault, Patricia." "You're right, of course, but I want to make sure you understand the full scope of what we're doing." I looked out her office window at the Chicago skyline. Somewhere out there, Daniel and Rebecca were probably discussing how to handle me going forward. Maybe they thought the slap would teach me to be more compliant. They had no idea what they'd actually done. "Patricia, for 6 months, I've been asking nicely for basic respect. I've been patient, understanding, accommodating. I've tried gentle requests, medical explanations, even begging. I picked up the elder abuse report and signed it with firm, clear strokes. They chose violence over conversation. Now they'll learn what consequences look like." Patricia nodded slowly. "I'll file everything this afternoon. The process server will deliver the notices tomorrow morning." "Perfect." We shook hands across her desk. "Edward, for what it's worth, you're doing the right thing." I walked out of her office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Tuesday morning, I worked like a detective building a case. The security system had captured everything, but I needed to organize the evidence systematically for legal proceedings. I created file folders for each type of violation: smoking, kitchen; smoking, living room; smoking, bedroom; verbal abuse; property damage. The property damage folder was particularly damning. Burn marks on my dining room table from carelessly placed cigarettes; ash stains ground into the hardwood floors; yellow nicotine residue on the walls that would require professional cleaning. Rebecca had been literally destroying my house one cigarette at a time. I photographed everything with my camera, making sure to capture timestamps and clear details. Each image was labeled, dated, and cross-referenced with security footage. The most disturbing folder contained clips of Rebecca smoking, while my grandchildren played nearby. Tommy doing homework at the kitchen table while cigarette smoke drifted over his books. Sally coloring pictures in the living room, occasionally coughing when the smoke got too thick. Child endangerment, another crime to add to the growing list. I documented my medical expenses related to increased COPD symptoms, emergency inhaler refills, additional doctor visits, prescription costs for stronger medications. The smoking in my home had cost me $200 in extra medical bills over 6 months. By noon, I had compiled a legal case that would impress any prosecutor. 47 separate violations of trust terms. Documented property damage exceeding $5,000. Medical expenses directly related to their actions. I uploaded everything to a secure cloud storage account and emailed copies to Patricia Wells. "Evidence package complete," I typed. "Ready for court if necessary." The doorbell would ring in exactly 6 hours. At 2:30 p.m., I positioned myself at my bedroom window with a clear view of the front door. Patricia had confirmed the process server would arrive between 2 and 3 p.m. A white sedan pulled into my driveway at exactly 2:34 p.m. I watched a woman in a business suit walk up my front steps carrying a manila envelope and a clipboard. She knocked 3 times, waited, then knocked again. Daniel opened the door in his pajama pants and a Northwestern University t-shirt. Even from my second-floor window, I could see his confused expression as the woman handed him the papers. "Daniel Mitchell?" Her voice carried clearly in the afternoon air. "Yes. You're being served with multiple legal notices regarding violations of the Mitchell Family Medical Trust, elder abuse charges, and eviction proceedings. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." I watched my son's face go completely white. "What? There must be some mistake." "No mistake, sir. The documents are self-explanatory. You'll want to contact an attorney immediately." She handed him the clipboard to sign, confirming delivery. Daniel's hands shook as he wrote his name. The process server walked back to her car while Daniel stood in the doorway, staring at the papers like he couldn't understand the words. Then I heard Rebecca's voice from inside the house. "Who was that?" A moment later, she appeared in the doorway next to Daniel. That's when the screaming started. Rebecca snatched the papers from Daniel's hands and started reading aloud. Each legal phrase made her voice get higher and more hysterical. "Elder abuse? Eviction? Trust violation?" Then she looked directly up at my bedroom window. She knew I was watching. The legal machinery was now in motion, and nothing could stop it. Patricia had explained the timeline clearly. 30 days notice to vacate. Automatic trust beneficiary transfer to Emma. Elder abuse investigation beginning immediately. But the most satisfying document was the one Rebecca would discover tonight, when she read the fine print. The trust modification that made Emma the primary heir, effective immediately. Emma was currently finishing her sophomore year at Northwestern, studying pre-med with a 3.9 GPA. She understood the value of clean air, healthy living, and respect for medical conditions. More importantly, she understood respect for her grandfather. I called Emma that evening to explain what was happening. "Grandpa, are you okay? Dad actually hit you?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Bruised but not broken. I can't believe he would do that. And Rebecca smoking in the house when you have COPD? That's attempted murder." Her medical training was already showing. She understood that deliberately exposing a COPD patient to cigarette smoke wasn't just rude, it was dangerous. "Emma, there's something else. I've modified the trust to make you the primary beneficiary. The house will be yours when I'm gone." Silence for several seconds. "Grandpa, I don't want to inherit anything because Dad and Rebecca are horrible people." "You're not inheriting because they're horrible. You're inheriting because you represent everything this family should be. Healing, respect, compassion, intelligence. What happens to them?" I looked out my window at Daniel and Rebecca loading boxes into their car. "They're learning what consequences look like." "Good," Emma said firmly. "It's about time." 20 years old, and she already had more wisdom than my 34-year-old son. At 4:15 p.m., I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Daniel was coming up to confront me, and he wasn't being quiet about it. He pounded on my bedroom door with enough force to rattle the frame. "Dad, open this door, right now!" I sat calmly at my desk, reviewing the legal documents one more time. Everything was filed, everything was official. His anger couldn't change the legal reality. "Dad, we need to talk." The pounding continued for 3 minutes before I finally unlocked the door. Daniel burst in holding the legal papers, his face red with rage and panic. "What the hell is this? Elder abuse? Eviction? You can't do this to us." I turned in my desk chair to face him. The bruise on my face had deepened to a dark purple that made him flinch when he saw it. "I didn't do anything to you, Daniel. You did this to yourselves." "This is insane. One little argument and you're trying to destroy our family? One little argument?" I pointed to my swollen face. "You call assault a little argument?" Rebecca appeared in the doorway behind him. "Dr. Mitchell, this is ridiculous. We can work this out like adults." I almost laughed at her audition of maturity. Adults don't assault elderly family members. Adults don't poison the air of someone with a respiratory condition. Adults show respect for the people who help them. Daniel waved the papers frantically. You can't just evict us. We have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you chose violence over conversation. Dad, please. I'm sorry about the slap. I was stressed and I lost my temper. It won't happen again. I stood up slowly, my bruised face inches from his. You're absolutely right. It won't happen again, because you won't be here to do it. Please, Dad, I'll do anything. Rebecca will quit smoking completely. We'll follow any rules you want. Just don't throw us out on the street. For a moment, I felt the familiar tug of parental sympathy. This was still my son, despite everything. The boy I'd taught to ride a bicycle, helped with homework, cheered for at baseball games. But then I remembered the taste of blood in my mouth. I remembered Rebecca's laughter. I remembered my grandchildren's terrified faces. Daniel, for 6 months, I asked for one simple thing. Don't smoke in my house because it's literally killing me. Your response was to dismiss my health concerns, minimize my suffering, and ultimately assault me for asking. I know, but we can fix this. No, son, some things can't be fixed. Some things can only be survived. Rebecca pushed past Daniel into my bedroom. Dr. Mitchell, be reasonable. Where are we supposed to live? We have 2 children. That's not my problem anymore, Rebecca. You're being vindictive and cruel. I picked up the security camera footage file from my desk. I'm being legal and appropriate. Would you like to see the video of your husband assaulting me? Or perhaps the hours of footage showing you smoking throughout my house despite knowing it triggers my medical condition? Her face went pale. She'd forgotten about the cameras. We can make this right, Daniel said desperately. The time for making things right was before you decided violence was an acceptable response to reasonable requests. I walked to my bedroom door and held it open. You have 30 days. I suggest you start packing. Daniel and Rebecca left my room in defeated silence, but I could hear them downstairs, arguing in harsh whispers. Rebecca blamed Daniel for overreacting. Daniel blamed her for being inconsiderate. Neither one accepted responsibility for their actions. Typical. An hour later, Daniel came back upstairs alone. This time he knocked gently. Dad, can we talk? Really talk? I opened the door to find my son looking genuinely broken. The anger was gone, replaced by something that looked like understanding. I watched the security footage on my phone, he said quietly. The whole incident. He sat down in my reading chair, the same chair where Rebecca had smoked cigarettes and dropped ashes on my floor. I didn't realize how bad I looked, how violent, how wrong. For the first time since the assault, Daniel seemed to see the situation clearly. And I watched some of the other footage too. Rebecca smoking while Tommy was doing homework, the kids coughing, you asking politely over and over again. He put his head in his hands. Dad, I turned into someone I don't recognize. I chose my wife's addiction over my father's health. I hit my own father. The admission hung in the air between us. The worst part is, I knew you were right. Deep down, I knew Rebecca was being disrespectful and dangerous, but I was so afraid of conflict with her that I made you the enemy instead. I sat down across from him. Daniel, recognition is the first step, but recognition doesn't undo the damage. I know, but maybe this is what we needed, a complete reset. He looked at my bruised face with what appeared to be genuine remorse. Maybe getting kicked out will force us to grow up. The packing began immediately. Daniel and Rebecca moved through the house like people dismantling their lives, which in many ways they were. I watched from my bedroom window as they loaded boxes into their minivan. Rebecca looked angry and resentful, slamming doors and throwing bags with unnecessary force. Daniel looked defeated and ashamed, handling everything with careful precision. Tommy and Sally didn't understand what was happening. I could hear them asking questions. Why are we leaving Grandpa's house? Are we going on vacation? When are we coming back? Rebecca's answers were sharp and bitter. Because Grandpa doesn't want us here anymore. We're moving to a new place. We're not coming back. Daniel tried to be gentler, but his explanations weren't much better. Grandpa needs space right now. We'll find our own house. Sometimes families need to live separately. None of it made sense to children who just wanted stability and love. That evening, I went downstairs to talk to my grandchildren privately. I found them in the basement family room, surrounded by half-packed toys and books. Tommy, Sally, come here for a minute. They climbed onto my lap carefully, aware that Grandpa was hurt, but not understanding why. Are you mad at us, Grandpa? Sally asked with 5-year-old directness. No, sweetheart. I'm not mad at you at all. I love you both very much. Then why do we have to leave? I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that have consequences. Your parents made some choices that mean they can't live here anymore. Will we still see you? I hugged them both tighter. You will always be welcome in my house. Always. That much was true. The children were innocent victims of their parents' poor decisions. The hardest moment came on Thursday morning when I had to say goodbye to Tommy and Sally. They stood in the driveway next to the packed minivan, looking small and confused. Sally was clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Tommy was trying not to cry. I knelt down to their level, ignoring the pain in my still bruised face. Grandpa, why can't we stay with you? Tommy asked. We'll be really good. The question broke my heart. These children thought they were being punished for something they'd done wrong. Listen to me very carefully, I said, holding both their hands. You are not leaving because you did anything wrong. You are the best grandchildren in the whole world. Then why? Because sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that affect the whole family. Your daddy made a mistake, and now he has to learn from it by living somewhere else. Sally's lower lip trembled. Will you forget about us? Never. I will never, ever forget about you. And you know what? I'm going to call you every single day to make sure you're okay. Promise? I promise. I hugged them both, breathing in the scent of their shampoo and the innocence that their parents had lost somewhere along the way. And when you get older, you can come visit me anytime you want. This will always be your grandfather's house, and you will always have a place here. Daniel loaded the last box into the van. Rebecca was already in the passenger seat, smoking a cigarette with the window cracked. Even now, even at this moment, she couldn't stop. Tommy and Sally climbed into their car seats, waving goodbye through the rear window as the van pulled out of my driveway. I stood there until they disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside my quiet, smoke-free house and breathed deeply for the first time in months. Moving day was surreal. After 8 months of constant noise, arguments, and cigarette smoke, my house felt like a cathedral of silence. I walked through each room, opening windows to let fresh air circulate. In the living room, I could still see the burn marks on my grandmother's antique coffee table, where Rebecca had carelessly placed lit cigarettes. The dining room walls showed yellow nicotine stains that would require professional cleaning. The hardwood floors had ash ground into the wood grain that no amount of mopping would remove. But the damage was just cosmetic. The house could be repaired, repainted, and restored to its original condition. The family relationships, however, would take much longer to heal. I found myself standing in the basement apartment they'd vacated, looking at the space I'd spent $35,000 to create for them. Custom cabinets, new appliances, beautiful finishes, all of it designed to make them feel at home and secure. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd given them a beautiful home, and they'd responded by making it uninhabitable for the person who owned it. My phone buzzed with a text message from Daniel. We're staying at a motel until we find an apartment. The kids are asking for you. I typed back, they can call me anytime. You have my number. No response. That evening I sat in my living room, truly my living room again, and called Emma. How are you holding up, Grandpa? I'm breathing easier, I said, and meant it literally. Good. You deserve peace in your own home. She was right. I did deserve peace. And for the first time in 8 months, I had it. That first night alone in my house was the best sleep I'd had in months. No cigarette smoke seeping up from the basement, no arguments echoing through the walls, no children coughing from secondhand smoke exposure, just silence and clean air. I woke up Saturday morning without wheezing for the first time since Rebecca moved in. My chest felt clear, my breathing steady and strong. Even my morning cough, the one that had become a constant reminder of my deteriorating condition, was noticeably better. Dr. Kim had been right. Environmental triggers were accelerating my COPD decline. Now that those triggers were gone, my body was already starting to heal. I spent the day cleaning. Not just regular cleaning, but deep restoration. I scrubbed nicotine residue from walls, treated burn marks on furniture, and ran air purifiers in every room. It felt like performing surgery on my own home, removing the cancer that had been slowly destroying it. By Sunday evening, the house smelled like itself again. Clean, fresh, alive. That's when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but when I answered, I heard Daniel's voice. "Dad, it's me." "Hello, Daniel. We... we need help. The motel is costing $89 a night, and we can't afford an apartment deposit. Most places want first month, last month, and a security deposit. We're looking at $3,000 just to move in somewhere." I stayed silent, letting him continue. "Rebecca's been applying for jobs, but without a permanent address, it's difficult, and the kids are having trouble adjusting." More silence from me. "Dad, are you there?" "I'm here. Can you help us? Please." The question I'd been expecting finally arrived. "Daniel, let me make sure I understand what you're asking. You want me to give you money after you assaulted me in my own home?" "Dad, I said I was sorry about that. I lost my temper." "You lost your temper and committed elder abuse. Those are two different things." I could hear Rebecca in the background, coaching him on what to say. "We have nowhere else to turn. Your family." "Family doesn't assault each other over cigarettes, Daniel. Can't you just forgive and forget? Help us get back on our feet?" The audacity was breathtaking. They were asking me to fund their recovery from the consequences of abusing me. "Daniel, for 8 months, I watched you choose Rebecca's addiction over my health, my safety, and my dignity. You made your choice. Now live with it." "But the kids, Dad. Think about Tommy and Sally." "I am thinking about them. I'm thinking about how they watched their father assault their grandfather. I'm thinking about how they've been breathing secondhand smoke for months. Maybe living away from Rebecca's cigarettes will be healthier for everyone." "You're being cruel." "I'm being realistic. You're experiencing the natural consequences of your actions." "So that's it? You're just abandoning your son?" "No, Daniel. You abandoned your father when you chose violence over conversation. I'm simply declining to fund your mistakes anymore." I hung up the phone and immediately blocked the number. Over the next week, I received calls from other family members trying to guilt me into helping Daniel and Rebecca. My sister Carol called first. "Edward, I heard what happened. Don't you think you're being a little harsh?" "Carol, did you see the video of Daniel slapping me?" "Well, no, but then you don't have enough information to form an opinion." My brother-in-law tried next. "Ed, family is family. You can't just cut them off over one argument." "One argument? Mark, he assaulted me. Would you let someone assault your wife and then give them money for an apartment?" Each conversation followed the same pattern. Family members who hadn't witnessed the abuse wanted me to be the bigger person and help them through this difficult time. None of them seemed to understand that I was the victim, not the villain. The most revealing call came from Rebecca's mother. "Dr. Mitchell, Rebecca told me what happened. I know she can be difficult about the smoking, but couldn't you have been more understanding?" "More understanding of what, exactly?" "Her stress levels. Job hunting is very difficult these days." "So you think cigarette smoke exposure is appropriate treatment for someone with COPD?" Long pause. "Well, when you put it like that, that's exactly how it was. Rebecca chose her addiction over my ability to breathe. Daniel chose to assault me rather than ask his wife to show basic respect." "But now they're homeless." "No, they're not homeless. They're learning that actions have consequences." The guilt campaign intensified over the following weeks. Daniel started sending me photos of Tommy and Sally looking sad in their temporary motel room. Text messages arrived daily. The kids miss their grandpa. "Sally cries every night asking when we can go home." "Tommy's grades are dropping because of the instability." Each message was designed to make me feel responsible for their situation. I saved every text and forwarded them to Patricia Wells. "Is this considered harassment?" I asked. Emotional manipulation, she replied. Keep documenting everything. The most manipulative attempt came through Tommy himself. Daniel coached my 8-year-old grandson to call me and beg. Grandpa, Daddy says you're mad at us and won't let us come home. My heart ached hearing his confused little voice. Tommy, I'm not mad at you. I love you very much. Then why can't we live with you anymore? I chose my words carefully. Because your daddy hurt Grandpa. And when people hurt others, there are consequences. But I didn't hurt you. No, sweetheart, you didn't. And you're welcome to visit me any time. Really? Really? But your mommy and daddy need to live somewhere else now. After I hung up, I called Patricia Wells again. They're using the children as emotional weapons. Is there anything I can do to stop it? Document everything. If they continue using the children to harass you, we can pursue additional legal remedies. The breakthrough came in mid-August when Emma called me with exciting news. Grandpa, I got accepted into the Northwestern Medical School early admission program. They're letting me start clinical rotations a year early. Emma, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. There's more. They offered me a research position at the university hospital. It comes with a small stipend, and I was wondering, what can I do to help? Well, I'll need a place to live that's close to campus. Dorm life isn't really practical for medical school students with research responsibilities. I smiled, knowing exactly where this conversation was heading. Emma, would you like to live here? The house is big enough for both of us, and it's only 20 minutes from Northwestern. Are you sure? I don't want to be a burden. Sweetheart, you could never be a burden. This house was designed for healing and learning. Having a future doctor living here feels absolutely perfect. Oh my God, yes. Thank you so much. Besides, with the trust modification, this will technically be your house eventually. You might as well start getting comfortable. Grandpa, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret what you did to Dad and Rebecca? I looked around my peaceful, smoke-free living room. No, Emma, I regret that it became necessary. But I don't regret protecting my health and my dignity. Good. What they did was inexcusable. Finally, a family member who understood the difference between compassion and enabling abuse. Emma moved in during the last week of August, bringing energy and purpose back to the house. Watching her set up her study space in the former guest room felt like witnessing the future of our family's medical legacy. Anatomy textbooks, medical journals, and research papers filled the shelves where Rebecca's romance novels used to collect dust. The contrast couldn't have been more striking. Emma respected every rule of the house naturally. She kept common areas clean, never brought toxic substances inside, and even helped me maintain the air filtration systems. These are incredible, she said, examining the HEPA filters I'd installed, perfect for someone with COPD. Having someone in the house who actually understood respiratory health felt like a miracle. My own health improved dramatically. The constant low-level wheezing that had plagued me for months disappeared completely. I was sleeping through the night without coughing fits. Even my energy levels returned to near normal. Dr. Kim was amazed at my progress during my September checkup. Edward, whatever you changed in your environment is working. Your lung function has actually improved. I smiled. I removed some toxic influences from my life. Keep doing whatever you're doing. I plan to do exactly that. In October, something unexpected arrived in my mailbox. A handwritten letter from Daniel. Not a text message or email, but an actual letter on paper, written in his careful, cursive handwriting. Dad, it began, I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. I read it sitting in my favorite chair, afternoon sunlight streaming through clean windows. You were right about everything. Rebecca's smoking was selfish and dangerous. My response to your reasonable requests was inexcusable. I assaulted my own father, and I will regret that moment for the rest of my life. The letter continued for 3 pages. Daniel explained that he'd entered counseling to understand why he'd chosen his wife's addiction over his father's health. Rebecca was also getting help for her nicotine addiction and the anger issues that had made her so resentful of basic house rules. We're not asking to move back in, he wrote. We know we destroyed that trust. but I hope someday you might forgive me enough to let me start earning back a relationship with you. The letter ended with words I never thought I'd hear from him. I'm sorry, Dad. I was wrong, and you deserve better. I read it 3 times before setting it down on the coffee table. Progress, finally. 3 months later, I'm writing this story from my peaceful living room, breathing clean air and feeling grateful for the difficult decisions that led to this moment. Emma is upstairs studying for her medical school exams. She'll graduate in 3 years and begin her residency at the same hospital where I spent 4 decades. The family medical tradition continues with someone who truly understands healing. Daniel and Rebecca found an apartment and are slowly rebuilding their lives. They're both in counseling. Rebecca is using nicotine patches instead of cigarettes, and Daniel has found work at a community bank. The children are adjusting well to their new routine. Most importantly, the violence stopped, the manipulation stopped, the disrespect stopped. Sometimes people need to lose everything before they understand the value of what they had. I see Tommy and Sally every other weekend now. They come to a house where they can breathe freely, where respect is expected and given, where their grandfather is valued rather than victimized. The trust documents remain unchanged. Emma will inherit this house when I'm gone, ensuring that it remains a place of healing and respect. Boundaries aren't cruel when they're necessary. Consequences aren't punishment when they're earned. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's worst behavior. Respect isn't a gift. It's earned, maintained, and when lost, it must be rebuilt through consistent action, not desperate words.